Apple's had way too much control over the iPhone for a long time. And I'm saying this as a pretty big Apple fanboy. I am well known for how much I tend to defend Apple's decisions. Yes, even the port on the bottom of the mouse. Tell me in the comments if I need to make a video about that, because I will. We're not talking about hardware today. We're here to talk about the App Store, because man, the App Store is an interesting place. Since July of 2008, Apple has enforced a 30% cut on all revenue through the App Store. It's important to note that that revenue cut only applies to digital goods. So if I'm purchasing something from Amazon or I'm purchasing a service, like I'm hiring an Uber, those don't take the 30% cut. I've always hated this model because it hurts the developers who are often the smallest. If I'm an indie game dev who just put up a game for $5, I'm paying Apple more money than big companies like Bank of America or Amazon, because those companies often don't have microtransactions in their apps or any way to buy digital goods through them. And the result of that is that I, as an individual, have to give Apple a huge cut of my revenue, and those other companies often don't have to. If they're taking 30%, they should be helping these developers out a lot more than they currently are. And we have better alternatives that they just won't let us use. This has frustrated me for such a long time, but I'm not the only one. Tim Sweeney from Epic Games has been just as frustrated as me. This is why 2 years ago, Tim Sweeney made the insane decision to add his own payment processing to Fortnite on the App Store, which immediately got them banned, but also started a huge series of litigations and lawsuits to try and get Apple to open up a bit. Well, finally now, 2 years later, it's happened. You can finally link to external methods of payment in the App Store. Yes, this means that previously, if you were Netflix or Spotify and you chose to not support Apple's processing for payments, you would just have to have a blank screen that says, sorry, you can't use this without an account. You couldn't give them instructions, you couldn't give them a link, you couldn't tell them where to go. All you could do was lock them out until they've signed in. And that sucks. The user experience there is terrible. And I'm sure that this has cost both Netflix and Spotify, as well as many other companies, millions, if not billions in revenue. Also, Apple can maintain this weird stranglehold and monopoly over how payments are processed via iPhone apps. It's insane to think that just by owning an iPhone, every single digital purchase you make on it has to go through Apple for a 30% fee, which is why today that's changed. Finally, Apple's being forced to let you link to external sources, and they're only taking a 27% cut now. Wait, what? They're still taking a cut? Ah, boy, we have to dive in. I've done a bunch of research, but honestly, this article by RevenueCat does a way better job, so I'm just going to go through this with y'all. If you're not familiar with RevenueCat, they're a service that makes it easier to manage subscriptions on multiple places, like the App Store and on the Play Store on Google's side. They know better than I ever would the depth of all of these things, so let's hear what they have to say. The Supreme Court stance on Epic versus Apple case. What this means for App Store monetization. Finally, you no longer have to pay Apple its 30%. Now you can just pay them 27%, plus whatever you pay your other payment processor. And that doesn't take into account the added friction for your users and the impact it has on conversion. We've gathered up everything we now know about the US Supreme Court ruling in the Epic Games versus Apple case, and its impact on how you're allowed to monetize your users going forward. In this blog, you'll find the Epic case, the first response from the Apple Epic ruling, the historical context. This is nuts. This case has been insane and going on for a while. Similar changes to the App Store IAP rules in other countries, and what to expect in terms of alternative payments and other App Store changes. So what we're talking about primarily is the January 16th, 2024 Epic versus Apple ruling and what it means for monetizing users. Based on recent changes to the App Store guidelines, you're now allowed to direct users to alternative payment methods outside of the App Store. This follows the legal battle between Apple and Epic and a subsequent decision by the US Supreme Court. By the way, how crazy is it that a gaming company was the one to force Apple to change when both Spotify and Netflix had failed in the past? I think that's really cool. Gamers rise up. At the same time, gamers, do better. We can't just be okay with Valve doing this and shit on Apple. Everybody who takes these highway robbery level cuts needs to be questioned. Yes, Apple doesn't let you use other app stores where technically you can install other stores on your PC, but as soon as another store that has a better cut comes out, like Epic's Game Store, which takes 12% instead of 30%, everyone shits on them constantly for it. So gamers, as much as I love you right now, reconsider who you're supporting, because gamers have this problem too. We should support the alternatives that pay devs better. Anyways. The actual court documents and the subsequent response from Apple's side make for a long and difficult read, but the main aspects are as follows. First point, linking to alternative payment methods. You can now include links in your apps that direct users to external websites for purchasing via the StoreKit external purchase link entitlement system. Yes, previously, you actually could not include a link to a way to pay in your app that brings you somewhere else. That was not allowed. The only way that you could even talk about payment in your app was through Apple's methods of payment like Apple Pay. Crazy to think that this is the first time ever you can get an app in the App Store with a link to somewhere else to pay. They also have a limitation on entitlement link usage. Links to external websites are subject to a range of restrictions, including you're only allowed one link in one place in the app. You're not allowed to put that link in a pop-up or interstitial. You can't put that link on your in-app purchase screen. You can't open up a web view in-app. You can only require them to open a new browser window. That actually I think is better. You can't pass additional information like the user ID when opening the browser. So you can't like embed the user ID. They have gimped the hell out of this flow, and they're charging 27%, which will be on top of whatever your other payment processors are paying. You'd be able to pick one of these options. If you have all three, you'd be violating the one place in your app. So you can have in your sign up page for special offers, go to here, get 50% off, go to here, lower prices offered here. These are all valid, but you can only do one of them. That is insane. But we're still only getting started because they have a lot of things that make this even worse than it seems right now. We'll go into the details as we go, don't worry. Apple's commission on external payments. As I said before, the commission is 27% or 12% for businesses that are part of the Apple Small Business Program. This program is such bullshit. It's so hard to get into. You have to manually apply every year, prove your finances are below a certain threshold, and then maybe if you're lucky, Apple will let you take 15% instead of 30% of your revenue. Like maybe. It's so stupid. I think Apple should just give you the first 100K to 500K with no fee. And after that point, they start charging their fee. Help the smaller developers find more success and tax the bigger companies who are making the most and getting the most value from your platform. I really don't like how these things are structured where you have to hit a minimum and not be over a maximum. Like that weird window in between is a strange thing to target, and they make it safe to jump through hoops. And that being only 12% for your first million in rev, that's silly. It's weird. We also have the reporting, auditing, and enforcement. This part's interesting because tracking which payments come from Apple versus which payments come from someone just going to your website is really annoying, especially when you're not allowed to put any identifiable info in the link, like they say here. So I can't track, trivially at least, where someone came from. I have to build a whole new payment processing flow in my service and link that exclusively in the iPhone app. And hopefully no one signs up any other way, but theoretically someone could just go to that webpage and sign up that way, and I wouldn't be able to track that separately. It's going to be so obnoxious, largely because of their inability to pass additional information here. They made this hard. And now they're going to enforce it, and they're complaining about how hard it's going to be. Absurd. Developers are also required to provide monthly accounting of qualifying out-of-app purchases within 15 days after the month's end, and Apple reserves the right to audit these records. You have to give Apple access to your books in order to use this feature. And they're going to scrutinize the hell out of them and say, hey, are you sure these payments didn't come from us? We want more of that percent. It's possible that depending on how well your books are cared for and how much you debate Apple, you could actually be paying Apple significantly more because they could screw you with the books. That's absurd. And the moment you don't agree, they can just ban you from the App Store, and now you lose a ton of your customers. It's absurd. The one-way nature of this relationship is the scary part to me. Apple has full control over your access to 1 billion users. And as soon as you're not paying them as much as they want, they can take that access away, as we saw with Epic and Fortnite. Doesn't matter how big you are, they can and will do this. And I'm scared that these changes are giving them more angles to do this at. Oh, and the best part, proverbial cherry on top. When you click that link, they give you this massive full screen warning that I have to zoom out to show you all of. You're about to go to an external website. Apple is not responsible for the privacy or security of purchases made on the web. And a bunch of details here. You need to click continue on. You get this full screen before you can actually go use the link that they're already taking a 27% cut of. So all they've done here is make things way harder for the devs, make things weirdly obtuse for the users, and to give up 3 of their 30% in their revenue. And they'll probably make more money because they're going to forge the books. Like this is so obnoxious. I can't believe they're getting away with this. I really can't. And here's what app developers should know. So for those of you who build apps, you'll hopefully get something from here. There's no sugarcoating it. It's close to impossible to implement external purchases with the entitlement in a way that makes sense for app developers. Even leaving aside the fact that you can only link to these external purchases from one screen, which also can't be your paywall, you simply can't make the economics work. Payment gateways like Stripe usually charge about 3% transaction fees. So if you add that to the Apple commission, you end up at the same commission that you would have paid for in-app purchases to begin with. However, actual conversion rates on external purchases would be much lower because of several additional points of friction. And here are the points of friction. The scare model, having to log in again on the website since you can't pass a token, so they would have to re-sign in on the web after signing in on the app. Obnoxious. And they also have to enter credit card information instead of using the in-app payment with Face ID or Touch ID. So you've made the experience worse for users in 3 very meaningful ways to give up a 3% and pass it to somebody else. It almost seems like that 27% number was picked because The competition is 3%, and they know that. So they're giving up that 3% fee to go over to whoever is processing the payment and maintaining everything else. That's insane. That's actually insane. Thankfully, people have noticed, and there are some important people who have noticed, even people you might not expect me to agree with. The first one is obviously Tim Sweeney. Let's take a look at his tweets because they're phenomenal as always. Apple filed a bad faith compliance plan for the district court's injunction. It totally undermines the order, allowing buttons, external links, or other calls to action that direct customers to purchase mechanisms in addition to in-app purchases. This is a fun one. They abused the word "or" here so that they would have to pick one of these at Apple to allow people to support. And they chose external links as the only thing they support, and they support it under very specific, restricted terms. Their interpretation of this ruling is that they have to support one of these options, not that they have to support developers who want to pick any one of these options, which is just a bullshit reading that they seem to be getting away with right now, that I'm hopeful gets challenged in court because that is absurd. That is actually absurd. And here's the summary that Tim Sweeney posted. Apple has introduced an anti-competitive new 27% tax on web purchases. Apple's never done this before, and it kills price competition. Developers can't offer digital items more cheaply on the web after paying a third-party processor 3 to 6% and then paying this new 27% on top. Apple dictates all aspects of these links and doesn't allow them in the app's ordinary payment flows. Rather, links must be separated out into different sections of the app, away from places where users actually buy stuff. So this also means like if you're in an app that has microtransactions in it, you can't buy those microtransactions when you find the place for them. Like if I'm playing a game and I want to purchase, I don't know, a new shirt in the game. And the new shirt, I'm on the page with the new shirt and I could buy it with the currency like through Apple with Apple Pay. The only way I would be allowed to purchase that thing through this new system would be to go to whatever page has that external link, go to it, navigate to the item I wanted to buy in the separate view on the web, buy it, go back to the app, hope that it's there. This is not a real workflow. This is Apple intentionally trying to make this worse outside of the spirit of the ruling. It's crazy how they found a way to comply, but also make things even worse. It's insane. Point 3 is that Apple requires developers to open a generic web browser session. Again, they can't carry your auth. So if you're signing in on the app, you have to re-sign in on the web to do anything. And also, Apple will front-run competing payment processors with their own scare screen. Yeah, we pointed that one out earlier. The scare screen is absurd. Epic will contest Apple's bad faith compliance plan in district court. Very exciting. I am so hyped that Tim is challenging this and that Epic is diving in as hard as they are because this case is absurd. And the fact that Apple lost and is in the end still doing the same bullshit sucks. This is the meme about Oracle where they're just a legal team. But that's Apple's entire stance on developers nowadays, it feels like, is Apple doesn't build innovative ways for us to build applications. Apple doesn't meaningfully improve the way that we create things for our users anymore. Like the only thing Apple's done for developers for years now is SwiftUI. And that's been a very, very slow rollout with not a very smooth experience overall. Xcode's rotting in a total mess. The payment stuff hasn't been touched at all since it was introduced in 2008. Like Apple's developer team is a legal team, not a software team. And it really shows in cases like this. Just absurdity. Tim Sweeney's obviously someone I look up to immensely and very much respect both for how he's handled this and how he's run Epic historically. But there's another legendary developer who has had thoughts. This is a developer I don't normally agree with, which is how you know how severe things are. DHH and I are fully aligned on this. I can't remember the last time I saw a DHH tweet and said, yeah, that's a good point. I can remember a lot of times where I said the opposite. So quick context on DHH's drama with Apple is that he was trying to get the Hey Calendar app support on the App Store. Hey Calendar is part of their Hey email service where you pay a monthly fee for the emails, the calendar, and all these things. You pay for that through their service, not through Apple Pay, which is important here because they didn't want to add Apple Pay and all the fees and everything associated with that. So they made it so you could use the app unless you paid externally. Apple has a weird policy around how you can't have an app that does nothing and you have to. It's really stupid and weird to work around. Their workaround for it was that the app does do something if you install it without an account. The thing it does is this weird Apple history calendar thing, where there's a project to take the history of Apple, the things they did right, they did wrong, etc., and they just took the data from that and put it in the app so it does something in the free version in order to get around this policy. Turns out that worked and they were able to ship to the App Store after this. Just stupid stuff you have to do to get around Apple's dumb policies. Obnoxious. He also cited this Apple Insider case, which I have not seen before. And if this is true, this is absurd. Yeah, Apple's trying to get Epic to reimburse $73 million and counting in litigation expenses. That's insane. Yeah. So they took their total cost and they took the 10% out because Epic won one of the counts. And they're expecting Epic to pay the rest now. This is insane. If Epic had prevailed on antitrust, the contract clause wouldn't have been enforceable. So the dispute was not about whether Epic owed damages. Apple does this as a matter of principle. They won't leave an amount in the tens of millions on the table, and their overall treatment of Epic, such as not putting Fortnite back, is meant to discourage other app makers from challenging Apple and from breaching the DPLA. By the way, this video might actually get me banned from the App Store. Thankfully, nothing I or my business are doing right now rely heavily on the App Store and on mobile apps. Otherwise, I would actually be scared to even make this video because of how awful they have been with this stuff. And I'm saying this as an Apple fanboy who, again, remind you, I can defend the mouse. I can't defend any of this shit. If you think I should do a full video about the history of Epic versus Apple, let me know in the comments, because when I did the Epic versus Google video, people didn't seem to care that much, but if enough of you are interested, I could cover this whole case. I know enough about it. I've been digging into this forever. So let me know in the comments if I need to do that. God, this is one of those cases where the more I look into it, the more frustrated I get. I want to support Apple. I genuinely believe the majority of what they do is to support users and build great experiences, because without those, they fail as a business. Apple's entire company is built around the idea of giving users the best experience they can so that they never want to leave and go somewhere else. I'm just sad that developers have to be left behind in Apple's pursuits, because I don't think they have to be. I think Apple's chosen for them to be. My hope is that Apple would walk back these terrible decisions and finally let developers use the platform. But knowing that they won't do that, I guess I have to hope for some legislation instead. Best of luck to Epic and everyone challenging Apple's awful decisions here. This shit's unacceptable, and I do sincerely hope we see some change. If you want to hear me talk about the Epic versus Google case, I'll pin that video here. Otherwise, I'll see you later. Peace, nerds.